The Scottish Government has announced new changes to greening rules for 2026. So ecological focus areas, there are now some changes. So for the existing options, there's some little changes to the requirements for these options, and there's an introduction of 4 new options as well, which people can go and take advantage of. Previously, there was also exemptions for people who had 75% grassland. This exemption has been removed. There continues to be exemptions if you are organic farm or if you've got under 15 hectares of arable. The 15 hectares of arable includes both arable land as well as temporary grassland as well. So this will probably be hitting a lot of the livestock farmers. They might be finding that they usually put in a field of forage crop each year, and which then turns into temporary grassland and could easily end up with more than 15 hectares of arable ground on their farm.
So in this video we are going to go through some of the changes to the existing greening options to highlight where these changes are occurring and perhaps give some suggestions of actions that farmers might want to take to ensure that they are going to meet their greening requirements in 2026. We're going to start with hedges.
Yeah, we've got a lovely hedge behind us here, which is great. So one of the changes we've noticed for hedges is previously we could have a gap of 20 metres in your hedgerow, whereas this has now been reduced down to 5 metres. It's a great opportunity to go and fill in the gaps in your hedges and put in some new plants. But if you do have gaps bigger than 5 metres and you're not planning on filling in the gaps, you won't be able to claim it as part of your greening.
It's worth saying that gateways are still allowed, so there's no need to deduct for a gateway.
There is a slight change on when you can cut your hedges as well. So if you're claiming it as an EFA hedge, you won't be able to cut your EFA hedge before the 1st of December. The exemption to this is if it's a roadside hedge and you're needing to cut it for safety reasons, or if you've got a field which is going into a winter oilseed rape or cereal crop, and then it can be cut before the 1st of December. Otherwise, all cutting must be done after the 1st of December.
So if that is going to be a problem for you because you want to be able to cut them at the normal time, then don't include that hedge in your EFA claim.
With the reduction in gaps in hedgerows going down from 20 metres down to having a 5 metres gap as a maximum to be able to claim it as an EFA hedge, is a great idea to get out and actually go and measure the gaps in the hedges. You're wanting to be measuring from the end of the growth to the end of the growth, and that will allow you to see exactly how wide the hedge gap is. If you were to go and measure from the stem is much further back, and in this case, instead of having a 5 metre gap, you'll be up at more like a 7 metre gap.
The other big change is to margins. So previously a margin had to be a minimum of 1 metre wide. That is being changed, and margins now need to be a minimum of 3 metres, so a significant change.
So if you have a margin that's existing in a field, which is 3 metres or more wide, leave it as it is. It's absolutely fine to keep it. If you're having to put in a new margin, this is when the rules change slightly. Putting in any new margins, or it could be extending an existing margin, the new part of the margin needs to have a diverse sward species in it. So if you're putting it into temporary grass, it needs to include at least 3 flowering species. You could go and put your margin into a wild birdseed mix or a wildflower mix instead.
We often get asked about margins and what's the width that we can include that is eligible within that margin. So here's a good example. The field boundary, and it's important to identify where the field boundary is, what the field boundary is. In this situation, the field boundary is a fence beyond this hedge. So the margin starts at the fence. It comes through the hedge. It's actually a ditch here, quite a deep ditch. It goes across the ditch, but because the width of the bed in the ditch is under 2 metres, we can still include that as part of the margin. So we're actually at 3.3 metres before we even got onto the actual grassy margin. So I'm going to walk across, see how far it goes. So we've got to the crop edge and it is it's 10.8 margin, so safely call it 10 metres. Now, looking up the field here, you might question, is this eligible as a margin? Because it looks like it is being occasionally drived on. And that is true. There is one further field up this boundary, but it's infrequent access. And so to me, this full 10 metres is still eligible. Let's look at another situation. So here's another margin situation. What is eligible from the fence to the crop edge in this situation? We've clearly got a farm track that is frequently used, and so this section needs to be deducted from the total area. So if we were, like in the last clip, 10 metres from the fence coming across to the crop edge, we need to take off at least 3 metres here to account for this ineligible area. If this road was 5 metres wide, we wouldn't be able to go across it and count what's on the other side. So that is a distinction that you need to keep in mind where you have an ineligible feature that is greater than 5 metres, you cannot go beyond it. So it's worth going around checking on your existing margins, working out where the margin would finish, because whilst you think you maybe only have 2 metres, you may find that in a lot of situations you actually do have 3 metres. So it is worth getting out and checking those margins for their widths, and at the same time checking those gaps in your hedges. So existing field margins, minimum width was 1 metre, and many people will have field margins that are 2 metres and beyond. The new requirement though is that a margin needs to be a minimum of 3 metres. So I have this handy 3 metre measuring aid, so I'm just going to push it in to the fence post. So it's currently 2 metres, this margin, so this margin will no longer be eligible for EFA use. It will need to be extended into the field if you want to use it. The other significant change is to fallow. It used to be that fallow could be left as bare ground, and that is now no longer allowed, and you need to establish a cover.
So there's 4 different ways you could be establishing a cover. It could be a temporary grass, which does need to have a diverse sward, which includes flowering plants in it as well. You could go and put it into a wild bird seed mix. You could put it into a wild flower mix, or you could go and put it into a soil conditioning. It can either be a single stand or it could be a mix that you're putting in.
So that's going to be problematic from farmers who were previously using temporary grass as their fallow, leaving it unused from the 1st of January until the 16th of July and cutting it for silage. That, to be eligible to continue to do that, you'll need to have the diverse sward with the flowering species in it.
But you might already have that diverse sward, so it is worth going out, having a look and seeing what you have got in the field already. Green cover is another option that has had some changes for this year. They have gone and included new options which you can include as your green cover. So you can now go and sow stubble turnips, forage rape, kale, fodder rape in and use it as green cover. You do still need to have at least 2 of the species on the list as part of your green cover.
This used to be a bit of a get out of jail card for some people when they realised they didn't have enough greening, and these changes have actually made it more attractive, and I think we may see an increase in the use of the green cover sown after harvest time. The other change was you're allowed to graze it. You're allowed to graze it as soon as it is ready for grazing. Previously, livestock were to be excluded until after the end of the maintained period, the 31st of December. But now you're able to graze it during that period, and that will also help make it a more attractive option. It is, however, it's got a 0.3 weighting, so it isn't you don't accumulate your greening as easily as with margins or with fallow.
Potentially, if you're a livestock farmer who's putting in stubble turnips and kale together anyway, it's a great way that you can use something existing to then be able to use it, just making sure you maintain it until the 31st of December.
The catch crop, which is essentially previously was undersown spring barley, it has had some small changes. Other crops have been added, but we don't anticipate there being much change in the uptake of that option.
Nitrogen fixing crops has also had a few small changes made to it. You do still need to continue to have your 3 metre margin around the nitrogen fixing crop, and you're still needing at least 2 nitrogen fixing crops. But the changes are that you can now apply a herbicide to control grass weeds, and you're also able to apply a fungicide as well, which can go and control the likes of chocolate spot.
You need to remember to still have the 3 metre margin around the nitrogen fixing crop, and it needs to go around the whole crop. Mixtures are also allowed, and so this may become a little bit more attractive, and it does introduce the opportunity of intercropping as well.
For 2026, there are changes to ecological focus areas, and one of the big changes is 4 new options which people have available for them. So firstly, there is herb and legume rich pastures, there's unharvested crops, there's low input grassland, and there's low density tree planting as well. So these are 4 new options which you can use whether you're doing EFA for the first time, or if you've been doing it for many years, you can still introduce one of these options or 4 of these options onto your farm.
I think the herb rich legume pasture could be quite a popular one. In temporary grass, it needs to include 3 herbs or legumes. There needs to be at least 1 legume. You're allowed to graze it at any time. You're not allowed to add inorganic bagged nitrogen fertiliser, but you are allowed to add phosphate and potash, and you are allowed to put on organic manure. So it has a weighting of 1.5, so it does accumulate quite a lot of greening, and if it is on a field scale area, I think it will be quite a useful option, especially for livestock farmers that are maybe being pulled into needing EFA greening for the first time. In the first year of establishment of this cover, it does need to be sown by the 1st of July.
At least once you've got it in place, you can then go and use it for future years as well. I think it's also worth being aware you can go and put lime on the field as well. So you can continue to maintain the field, just not with that bagged nitrogen fertiliser.
Unharvested crop is another option that has been taken from the agri-environment schemes and brought into it being a greening option. Basically, it is leaving a strip of the crop that is in the field, but you don't put any fertiliser on it, you don't put any plant protection products on it. These strips or margins need to be at least 6 metres wide and can be up to 20 metres wide. And they need to be left in place for the benefit of the wildlife and seed-eating birds, game birds, until the 31st of December.
Low input grassland is another option which might go and suit some of these grassland farmers as well. It has a very low weighting of 0.2, so you are going to need quite a large area for it to go and make a difference to your greening area. So you're not going to be able to go and put on any bagged fertiliser, but you can go and spread organic manures onto the field. You're able to graze the field, you can go and cut the field for hay and haylage. Although if you are cutting the field, you do need to leave a 3 metre margin, a minimum of 3 metre margin around the outside of the field. and that margin does need to be grazed later in the year.
The final new option is low density planting, and this can be done on arable ground or permanent pasture. The attractive thing about it, it has a 2 weighting, so you get a bit more bang for your buck with this option. The tree density needs to be from 20 to 50 trees per hectare. That's actually a very small number when you consider that commercial planting is 2,000 trees per hectare. And the intention is that they provide a bit of shading for livestock, or that they could be fruit trees, but they do need to be of a native tree species.
So I think with these 4 new options, as well as the existing options, there's plenty for people to go and choose for, and to figure out what the best options for their farm is. You can go and use a variety of these different options. You don't just need to use one option only. It's often easier to go and pull in a few different options to what works well for you, works well for your farm, as well as benefiting biodiversity at the same time. For more information on all of the options we have discussed today, go and have a look on the Rural Payments and Services website, where you'll find the full guidance.